The stars were dying around Earth. Sarah Chung watched from the bridge of the Defiant as another human defense platform exploded in bright orange fire. The metal pieces scattered into space like tears from a broken dream. "How many ships do we have left?" Sarah asked her second officer. 17, Commander, came the grim reply. The aliens destroyed the rest. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. Just 3 years ago, humanity had controlled over 200 star systems. They had been proud of their growing empire among the stars. Now they were down to their last few ships, hiding behind Earth like children behind their mother's skirt. The Zexkari had come from somewhere beyond the rim of known space. They were made of living crystal and metal, their bodies gleaming like jewelry in the starlight. But there was nothing beautiful about their purpose. They called humans a carbon plague that needed to be wiped clean from the universe. "Commander." Incoming message from the Zexkari fleet, the communications officer reported. "Put it on screen," Sarah said. The alien that appeared looked like a walking diamond. Its voice sounded like breaking glass when it spoke. "Human leader, this is War Master Zexthul. Your species has 30 minutes to surrender. After that, we will turn your homeworld into dust. Choose wisely." The screen went black. Sarah felt the weight of 6 billion human lives pressing down on her shoulders. The evacuation ships had already left with as many people as they could carry. But billions more remained on Earth, and there was nowhere left for them to run. "Commander," a voice called from behind her. Sarah turned to see Dr. Marcus Webb walking toward her. He was an old man with white hair and kind eyes, but today he looked different. There was something desperate in his face. "Dr. Webb, what are you doing on the bridge?" Sarah asked. "I need to speak with you," he said. "It's about the precursor ruins we found on Cathar Prime." Sarah had heard about Webb's archaeological work. He studied dead alien civilizations, trying to understand what had happened to them. It seemed like useless work when humanity was fighting for its life, but she had always respected the old scientist. "Doctor, we don't have time for ancient history," Sarah said. "The Zexkari are about to attack Earth. That's exactly why you need to listen," Webb said firmly. "In the ruins, we found something. References to beings called the Ancient Ones. They're older than any civilization we know about. Much older." Sarah frowned. "What does that have to do with our situation?" Webb pulled out a small data pad. "According to the precursor records, these Ancient Ones had power beyond imagination. They could change reality itself just by thinking about it. The precursors wrote about them like they were gods." "Gods don't exist, Doctor," Sarah said, though her voice was less certain than her words. "Maybe not," Webb agreed. "But these beings were real. The precursors left detailed records about how to contact them. They called it the calling. It's some kind of ritual that can reach across dimensions." Sarah looked back at the view screen, where more human ships were dying under alien fire. "Even if these Ancient Ones are real, why would they help us?" Webb's face grew dark. "I don't know if they would help us. The precursors were afraid of them. Every civilization that used the calling seems to have vanished afterward. But Sarah," he used her first name, which he had never done before, "we're going to vanish anyway. The Zexkari will make sure of that." The ship shook as alien weapons hit their shields. The lights flickered for a moment. "How long would this ritual take?" Sarah asked. "I'm not sure. Maybe hours. Maybe days. We would need to gather all our remaining ships and use their computers together. And we would need someone to serve as a beacon. Someone to reach across the dimensions and make contact. That sounds dangerous. It would probably kill whoever tried it," Webb admitted. "But Commander, look around us. We're all going to die anyway. At least this way, humanity might have a chance." Sarah looked at the tactical display. The Zexkari fleet was massive. their ships gleaming like deadly jewels against the black of space. They had been preparing for this final assault for weeks, gathering their forces to crush the last human resistance. If we try this calling, and it doesn't work, we'll have wasted our last chance to fight, Sarah said. If we fight, we'll lose, Webb replied simply. Their technology is too advanced. Their numbers are too great. But if the Ancient Ones are real, if they still exist somewhere out there, then maybe we can change the rules of this war. Another explosion lit up the view screen. This time, it was the orbital station where Sarah's sister worked. She felt something cold and hard settle in her stomach. How many ships would we need for this ritual? She asked. All of them, Webb said. Every computer, every power core, working together to send a signal across dimensions. It would leave us completely defenseless. And you want to volunteer to be this beacon? Webb nodded. I've spent my whole life studying dead civilizations. Maybe it's time I helped save a living one. Sarah looked around the bridge. Her crew was watching her, waiting for orders. They were good people, brave people. They deserved better than to die here, forgotten in the darkness between the stars. Dr. Webb, she said finally, prepare your ritual. We'll try to reach these Ancient Ones. Commander, are you sure about this? Her second officer asked. Sarah watched another human ship break apart under alien fire. No, she said honestly. I'm not sure about anything. But I know that doing nothing means we all die. At least this way, we're still fighting. Webb's old face broke into a smile. I'll start the preparations immediately. As he left the bridge, Sarah turned back to the view screen. The Zexkari fleet was moving closer, their crystal ships catching the light from Earth's sun. They thought they had already won. They thought humanity was finished. Maybe they were right. But if the universe was going to lose humanity, it would not be without a fight. Even if that fight meant waking things that should perhaps stay sleeping. All ships, Sarah said into her communications unit. This is Commander Chun. Prepare for emergency jump to the Void Nebula. We have one last plan, and it's probably going to get us all killed. But it's the only chance we have left. The stars wheeled around them as the human fleet prepared to make their desperate gamble. The dead world of Cathara Prime looked like a giant's graveyard. Dr. Marcus Webb stared down at the planet's surface through the shuttle's small window. Everything was covered in a strange crystal dust that sparkled in the pale light of the dying star above. Are you sure this is the right place, Doctor? Asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, Webb's student and partner in the archaeological work. I'm sure, Webb said quietly. The precursor ruins are here, buried deep under all that crystal sand. And somewhere in those ruins are the answers we need. They had been traveling for 2 days since leaving Commander Chun and the main fleet. The human ships were hiding in the Void Nebula, waiting for Webb's team to return with the information they needed to perform the calling. But time was running out. Zexkari scout ships had been spotted in nearby systems, hunting for the remaining humans. The shuttle landed with a soft thump on the crystal sand. Webb's team stepped out wearing heavy environmental suits. The air on Cathara Prime was poisonous, and the radiation from the dead star above would kill them in hours without protection. The entrance to the Archive of Echoes should be about 2 kilometers north, Webb said, checking his instruments. Everyone stay close. This planet has claimed enough lives already. They walked across the crystal desert in single file. The sand crunched under their boots like broken glass. In the distance, they could see the broken remains of precursor cities. Their strange spire-like buildings twisted and melted by whatever disaster had destroyed this world. Dr. Vasquez walked beside Webb. Carrying the translation equipment, they would need to read the ancient records. Marcus, she said over the radio, what if we're wrong about this? What if the Ancient Ones are just myths? Then humanity dies, Webb replied simply. But Elena, I've been studying dead civilizations my whole life. I've seen what happens when species give up hope. The precursors didn't give up. They left us these records for a reason. After an hour of walking, they found what they were looking for. A massive hole in the ground, perfectly round and so deep that their lights couldn't reach the bottom. This was the entrance to the Archive of Echoes, the greatest library ever built by the precursor civilization. "How do we get down there?" asked Tom Rodriguez, their computer expert. Webb pointed to metal rings set into the side of the hole. The precursors built a ladder system. "It goes down for almost 3 kilometers. 3 kilometers? Tom's voice cracked a little. "That's going to take hours to climb down." "Then we better start now." Webb said to climb down into the archive was long and dangerous. The metal rings were ancient, and some of them broke under their weight. But slowly, carefully, they made their way down into the depths of the dead planet at the bottom. They found themselves in a vast chamber carved from solid rock. The walls were covered in the strange symbols that the precursors had used for writing. But these weren't just carved into the stone. They glowed with a soft blue light, as if they were still alive after millions of years. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez. "It's beautiful." The archive stretched out before them like a cathedral made of light and knowledge. Thousands of crystalline data cores lined the walls, each one containing the memories and wisdom of the precursor civilization. In the center of the chamber stood a control terminal, its surface covered with symbols that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Webb approached the terminal carefully. He had spent years learning to read precursor writing, but this was more complex than anything he had seen before. The symbols seemed to respond to his presence, glowing brighter as he came closer. "Elena, bring the translation computer," he called. "We need to access their database." For the next several hours, Webb and his team worked to unlock the secrets of the archive. The precursor computer system was incredibly advanced, but it was also very old. Many of the files were damaged or corrupted. But slowly, piece by piece, they began to find what they were looking for. The first references to the ancient ones were buried deep in the oldest files. The precursors called them the harbingers of the void, beings that existed before the first stars formed. According to the records, these entities had shaped reality itself during the early days of the universe. "Listen to this," Dr. Vasquez said, reading from one of the translated files. "They speak of beings that exist outside normal space and time, creatures that can unmake matter just by thinking about it." Webb found another file that made his blood run cold. "Elena, look at this entry. It's a warning. The precursors tried to contact the Ancient Ones during their own war against an enemy called the Devourers. What happened?" Webb read the translation slowly. "They succeeded in making contact. The Ancient Ones came and destroyed the Devourers completely. But then," he paused, his voice growing quiet, "then they destroyed the precursors too. According to this, the Ancient Ones decided that both civilizations were too dangerous to exist." Tom looked up from his computer station. "So every species that calls these things ends up dead?" "It looks that way," Webb admitted. "But Elena, look at this section here. The precursors left detailed instructions for the calling ritual. They wanted future civilizations to know how to contact the Ancient Ones, even though it might mean death." Dr. Vasquez frowned. "Why would they do that?" Webb found another file that answered her question. "Because some things are worse than death. The Devourers were apparently trying to consume all life in the galaxy. The precursors thought that calling the Ancient Ones was worth the risk." Suddenly, alarms began blaring from their shuttle on the surface. Tom checked his communications equipment. "We have a problem," he said. "Zexkari ships jumped into the system. They found us." Webb looked at the archive around them. There was so much more to learn, so many secrets still hidden in the ancient database. But they were out of time. Download everything you can, he ordered. Focus on the ritual instructions. If the Zexkari are here, then Commander Chun and the fleet are in danger. They worked frantically to copy the precursor files. The translation computer overheated from the strain, and Tom had to reroute power from their life support systems to keep it running. All the while, they could hear the sounds of battle far above them as Zexkari fighters searched for their shuttle. "Got it," Dr. Vasquez finally announced. "I have the complete ritual instructions, plus all the warnings the precursors left behind." "Are the instructions clear enough to follow?" Webb asked. Elena looked at the data with tired eyes. "Yes, but Marcus, the warnings are very specific. Every civilization that performed this ritual was destroyed afterward. Every single one." Webb gathered his team and headed for the ladder back to the surface. As they climbed, he thought about what they had learned. The Ancient Ones were real, and they could be contacted. But calling them was like playing with nuclear fire while standing in a warehouse full of explosives. When they reached the surface, they could see Zexkari ships in the distance, their crystal hulls gleaming in the starlight. The alien vessels were searching methodically, but they hadn't spotted the human shuttle yet. "We need to get this information to Commander Chun," Webb said, as they hurried toward their ship. "She needs to know what we're really asking humanity to risk." As their shuttle lifted off and jumped to hyperspace, Webb looked back at the dead world of Cathara Prime. The precursors had faced the same choice that humanity now faced: certain death, or possible salvation that might prove worse than death. The difference was that humanity still had a chance to choose. The Void Nebula was a place where stars went to die. Commander Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the swirling clouds of gas and cosmic dust that hid what remained of humanity's fleet. 87 ships, carrying the last 3 million humans in the universe. Dr. Webb had returned from Cathara Prime with the information they needed, but also with warnings that made Sarah's stomach turn cold. Every civilization that had performed the calling ritual had been destroyed afterward. Not by their enemies, but by the very beings they had summoned for help. "Are we really going to do this?" asked Captain Martinez from the battlecruiser Prometheus. His face looked tired on the communication screen. "Wake up cosmic entities that might decide we're too dangerous to live." Sarah looked around the room where humanity's surviving leaders had gathered. There were ship captains, scientists, engineers, and philosophers, the last representatives of human civilization, trying to decide whether to risk everything on a gamble that had never worked before. "The way I see it," said Dr. Patricia Wong, the fleet's chief psychologist, "we're already dead. The Zexkari won't stop hunting us until every human is extinct. At least this way, we might take our enemies with us." "That's not the point," argued Professor James Liu, who taught ethics at the university ship New Athens. "If we call these Ancient Ones and they decide to cleanse the galaxy of all life, then we're responsible for genocide on a cosmic scale." Webb spoke up from his chair at the end of the table. "The precursors left us these instructions for a reason. They wanted future civilizations to have this choice. Maybe they thought that someday a species would come along that was different enough to survive contact with the Ancient Ones. Or maybe they just wanted company in extinction." Captain Martinez said grimly. Sarah felt the weight of decision crushing down on her. Outside the conference room, millions of humans waited in crowded ships, trusting their leaders to find a way forward. Children who would never see their home worlds again. Scientists whose life's work was destroyed. Artists whose cultures existed now only in digital storage. "Dr. Webb," she said finally, "explain the ritual to me one more time. What exactly are we asking people to risk?" Webb activated the holographic display. Ancient precursor symbols appeared in the air, glowing with the same blue light they had seen in the archive. "The ritual requires us to link all our ship computers together in a quantum resonance array. This creates a signal that can cross dimensional boundaries. And the beacon? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Someone has to serve as a living transmitter. They have to open their mind completely and send our message across the dimensions to wherever the Ancient Ones are sleeping. Webb paused. The process will probably destroy their sanity. It might kill them outright. Elena Vasquez, who had been quiet during the discussion, suddenly spoke up. "I'll do it." Everyone turned to look at her. The young archaeologist was pale but determined. Marcus has spent his whole life studying ancient civilizations. He's too valuable to lose. I'm younger, and my mind might be more flexible. If someone has to make this sacrifice, it should be me. Elena, no, Webb said firmly. This was my discovery, my responsibility. With respect, Dr. Webb, Sarah interrupted, that decision isn't up to either of you. It's up to me. She looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. But first, we need to vote. Should we attempt to calling, knowing that it might doom us all? The debate that followed was fierce but brief. They didn't have time for long philosophical discussions. The Zexkari were hunting them, and it was only a matter of time before they were discovered. In the end, the vote was close. 15 in favor, 12 against. Humanity would attempt to wake the Ancient Ones. Very well, Sarah said. Dr. Webb, prepare your ritual. I want all ship engineers standing by to link their computers to the array, and I'll serve as the beacon. The room erupted in protests. Commander, you can't, argued Captain Martinez. The fleet needs you. The fleet needs someone to take this risk, Sarah replied. And I won't ask anyone to do something I'm not willing to do myself. Webb looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew better than to challenge Sarah when her mind was made up. We'll need about 6 hours to prepare the quantum array. The ritual itself will take maybe an hour once we begin. As the meeting broke up, Sarah found herself alone with Elena. The young scientist was staring out the window at the swirling nebula clouds. Are you afraid? Elena asked quietly. Sarah considered lying, but decided on honesty. Terrified? You? Same. Elena smiled sadly. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days on Earth. She said the bravest people weren't the ones who weren't scared. They were the ones who were scared, but did what needed to be done anyway. 4 hours later, alarms began blaring throughout the fleet. Zexkari ships had found them. Sarah ran to the bridge as her crew scrambled to battle stations. On the main screen, she could see the alien fleet emerging from hyperspace. Dozens of crystal ships, their weapons already charging for attack. How did they find us? Demanded Captain Martinez over the communications link. Doesn't matter now, Sarah replied. Dr. Webb, how much longer do you need for the array? Webb's voice crackled over the intercom from the computer core. 2 hours minimum. The quantum calibrations are incredibly complex. Sarah watched the Zexkari ships moving into attack formation. We don't have 2 hours. All ships, prepare for defensive action. Buy Dr. Webb as much time as possible. The battle that followed was desperate and one-sided. Human ships darted between the nebula clouds, trying to use the gas and dust for cover. But the Zexkari had better sensors, better weapons, better everything. One by one, human vessels began to fall. The university ship New Athens exploded in brilliant fire, taking 10,000 civilians with it. The cargo hauler Promise broke apart under crystal weapons, scattering its load of frozen colonists into the void. Sarah, Webb called over the intercom. The array is as ready as it's going to be. We can attempt the ritual now, but the calculations are incomplete. It might not work. Sarah looked at the tactical display. They had maybe 20 ships left, and the Zexkari were closing in for the final assault. Do it, she ordered. She ran from the bridge to the computer core. where Webb and Elena were working frantically at the quantum array controls. The machinery around them hummed with dangerous energy, creating fields that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "Sarah, the beacon chair is ready," Webb said, pointing to a metal seat surrounded by neural interface equipment. "But I should warn you, the process might feel like having your mind torn apart and rebuilt." Sarah sat down in the chair and let Webb attach the neural connectors to her head. Around her, she could feel the power of every ship in the fleet flowing through the quantum array. It was like sitting inside a lightning storm. "Are you ready?" Webb asked Don before Sarah could answer. The Defiant shook under enemy fire. Through the walls, she could hear the sounds of battle growing closer. "Now or never," she said. Webb activated the array. Reality exploded. Sarah felt her consciousness expand beyond her body, beyond the ship, beyond normal space and time. She was falling through dimensions, her mind stretched across impossible distances. In the darkness between realities, she sensed something vast and ancient stirring. The Ancient Ones were not happy to be disturbed. Contact was made. Sarah screamed as her mind touched intelligences older than galaxies, beings that remembered when the universe was young and empty. They were furious at being awakened from their eons-long sleep. Around the human fleet, space began to change. Stars flickered and changed color. The laws of physics started to bend and waver. Through tears and reality itself, enormous shadows began to move. The Ancient Ones were coming, and they were not pleased. Reality broke apart like glass. Commander Sarah Chun was still connected to the quantum array when the Ancient Ones began to emerge from the spaces between dimensions. Her mind, stretched across impossible distances, felt them coming like a tide of cosmic force that made the vacuum of space seem solid by comparison. They were not beings in any sense that humans could understand. They were living concepts, embodiments of forces that existed before matter itself had formed. Where they touched normal space, stars aged rapidly and died. Time flowed backward in spiraling eddies. Space folded in on itself like origami made from the fabric of existence. On the bridge of the Defiant, Dr. Webb watched in terror and amazement as the Ancient Ones manifested around the human fleet. They appeared as shadows cast by things that existed in too many dimensions to see clearly. Vast shapes that hurt to look at directly, geometries that made no sense to minds evolved in a three-dimensional universe. "My God," whispered Elena, staring at the readings from their instruments. "The energy signatures are off the scale. These things are rewriting the fundamental laws of physics just by existing here." The Zexkari fleet had been closing in for the kill when reality began to change around them. Now the crystal aliens found themselves facing something far beyond their understanding. Their war master, Zexthal, tried to comprehend what his sensors were telling him. "What are those things?" demanded his second-in-command. "Where did they come from?" Zexthal's crystalline face reflected confusion and the first stirrings of fear. In 1,000 years of conquest, the Zexkari had never encountered anything they couldn't understand and destroy. Their empire was built on the certainty that superior technology and numbers could overcome any obstacle. They were about to learn. Otherwise, the first ancient one to fully manifest was a being of pure shadow and starlight. It turned its attention toward the Zexkari fleet with what might have been mild curiosity. The crystal ships opened fire immediately, pouring their most destructive weapons into the cosmic entity. The Ancient One didn't fight back. It simply existed at the weapons, and they ceased to be. The energy beams that struck it didn't explode or dissipate. They were unmade, reduced to their component particles, and then reduced further, until even the memory of their existence faded from reality. The Ancient One regarded the Zexkari fleet with something that might have been amusement. "Impossible," breathed Zexthal. "Nothing can simply ignore our weapons like that." His science officer was frantically checking readings that made no sense. "Sir, the entity appears to be manipulating matter at the quantum level. It's not blocking our attacks. It's convincing reality that they never happened." More ancient ones were emerging now, each one a nightmare of impossible geometry and cosmic power. They moved through space without regard for physics, appearing and disappearing as they chose. One of them approached the Zexkari battlecruiser and simply looked at it. The ship began to age rapidly. Its crystal hull, which had been forged in stellar furnaces and was supposed to last for millions of years, started to crack and crumble. The crew inside watched in horror as their vessel transformed from a mighty war machine into cosmic dust in a matter of seconds. "Retreat," ordered Zexthal. All ships, emergency, jumped to hyperspace. But as his fleet tried to flee, they discovered that the Ancient Ones existed partially outside of linear time. There was nowhere to run from beings who were already at your destination before you decided to leave. The Zexkari overmind, the collective intelligence that ruled their empire, reached out across subspace to assess the threat. Its vast electronic consciousness touched the edge of an Ancient One's awareness and recoiled in shock. These entities were older than the first galaxies. They remembered when the universe was empty and silent, when consciousness was just a possibility waiting to be born. They had withdrawn from active reality, not because they were defeated, but because younger species had made existence too noisy and chaotic for their taste. On the human ships, people watched in awe and terror as the Ancient Ones casually dismantled the Zexkari fleet. Crystal ships that had seemed invincible were reduced to their component atoms with what appeared to be casual thought. The proud alien empire that had conquered most of the galaxy was being erased from existence by entities that treated their advanced technology like a child's toy. But Sarah, still connected to the quantum array, felt the Ancient Ones turning their terrible attention toward the human fleet. Their communication was like standing in the heart of a dying star, painful and overwhelming. The message they sent was clear. They were furious at being disturbed. They viewed the younger races as irritating insects that had awakened them from their cosmic slumber. The Zexkari were being destroyed not because they were evil, but because they were loud and bothersome. And now the Ancient Ones were examining humanity with the same cold regard. "You called us," the nearest entity said, its voice bypassing human ears and speaking directly to their minds. "You woke us from our rest. Why?" Sarah, her consciousness still stretched across dimensions, tried to form an answer. Every word felt like lifting a mountain with her thoughts. "Our species was dying," she managed to communicate. "The Zexkari were destroying us. We called for help." The Ancient One's attention felt like being studied by a cosmic microscope. "Help? You sought to use us as weapons in your petty war?" Around the human fleet, space continued to buckle and warp as more Ancient Ones manifested. Sarah could sense their growing displeasure. They had been summoned by another young species, seeking to use their power for conquest and survival. "We have seen this before," another Ancient One communicated. "Every civilization that calls us seeks the same thing: power to destroy their enemies. In the end, they all disappoint us." Elena, monitoring the quantum array from the computer core, saw readings that terrified her. "Marcus, they're preparing to do something. The energy patterns are the same as what they used on the Zexkari ships." Webb realized what was happening. "They're going to destroy us too. They see us as no different from the Zexkari." Sarah felt the Ancient One's decision forming like a gathering storm. They would cleanse this part of the galaxy of all the noisy young life forms. Both humans and Zexkari would be reduced to component particles, leaving the universe quiet and peaceful once again. But then Sarah did something that surprised them. Instead of begging for mercy or trying to argue for humanity's right to exist, she opened her mind completely. She showed them not just her own thoughts, but the minds of every human in the fleet. The Ancient Ones saw human art and music, philosophy and poetry. They experienced humanity's capacity for love and sacrifice, their endless drive to explore and understand. But most importantly, they witnessed something they hadn't expected. Even facing extinction, Sarah was thinking not about revenge against the Yashkari, but about mercy. She was hoping that if humanity had to die, the Ancient Ones might spare their enemies as well. Because consciousness itself, in any form, was precious and deserved a chance to grow. For the first time in eons, the Ancient Ones paused to truly consider what they were about to destroy. The cosmic entities had expected another species, seeking power and conquest. Instead, they found minds that chose compassion even in the face of annihilation. One Ancient One spoke, its voice like the whisper of galaxies being born. Curious. This is unexpected. The judgment of the Ancient Ones stretched across moments that felt like eternities. Commander, Sarah Chun remained connected to the quantum array. Her consciousness spread across dimensions, while cosmic entities older than stars examined every aspect of human civilization. They read the memories of everyone in the fleet, experiencing 10,000 years of human history in the space. Between heartbeats, the Ancient Ones saw humanity's wars and their peace treaties. They witnessed acts of terrible cruelty and incredible kindness. They observed humans destroying their environment and then fighting to save it. They watched humans hate each other for meaningless differences and then die to protect strangers. But what puzzled them most was what they found in Sarah's mind at that moment. Even facing extinction, even knowing that the Ancient Ones could erase humanity with a thought, she was not thinking about survival or revenge. She was thinking about the Zexkari. "Show us," commanded the nearest Ancient One, its voice resonating through dimensions. "Show us why you concern yourself with those who sought your destruction." Sarah opened her memories completely. The Ancient Ones saw her watching Zexkari prisoners during the war. They were terrified, just like humans would be. They mourned their dead, just like humans did. They had families and dreams and hopes for the future. "They called us a plague," Sarah communicated through her stretched consciousness. "But we're all just trying to exist. Trying to find meaning in a universe that's vast and empty and doesn't care about us." The Ancient Ones probed deeper into the human fleet's collective consciousness. They found Dr. Webb still working frantically at the computer controls, thinking about all the dead civilizations he had studied. Each one had been unique, with its own art and wisdom. And now they existed only as ruins and memories. They found Elena Vasquez, terrified but determined, hoping that whatever happened, some record of human achievement would survive. She was thinking about the children in the evacuation ships, and whether they would grow up to see new worlds and make new discoveries. They found Captain Martinez and his crew, ready to die fighting, but hoping that their sacrifice might mean something. They found Professor Liu, still wrestling with the ethics of calling cosmic entities to solve human problems. And in all of them, the Ancient Ones found something they had never encountered before in millions of years of contact with younger species. The humans weren't asking for power. They weren't seeking conquest or revenge. They were asking for the chance to grow, to learn, to become something better than they were. One of the Ancient Ones spoke, its voice like the sound of galaxies being born. "In all our existence, every species that has called us has sought to use our power for domination. They wanted us to destroy their enemies and make them rulers of their local space." Another Ancient One added, "But you called us to preserve something. Not to destroy your enemies, but to preserve the possibility of consciousness itself." Sarah felt her mind burning under the strain of the connection, but she forced herself to respond. "We're not perfect. We've made terrible mistakes, but we're trying to be better. And if you destroy us, if you destroy the Zexkari, then all that potential is lost forever. The Ancient Ones withdrew from the human minds and conferred among themselves in ways that existed outside normal space-time. Their discussion was brief by cosmic standards, lasting only a few thousand years from their perspective, though mere seconds passed in normal reality. Finally, they reached a decision that surprised even themselves. "We have judged countless civilizations," the lead Ancient One announced. "All have failed our tests. All have been found wanting. But you have shown us something new." Space around the human fleet began to stabilize as the Ancient Ones focused their attention. The Zexkari ships that remained were caught in fields of cosmic force, unable to move or attack. "Your species called us not for conquest, but for preservation. You showed mercy to enemies who sought your extinction. You chose compassion over vengeance, even when facing annihilation." Sarah felt the quantum array connection beginning to fade as the Ancient Ones withdrew their cosmic presence from normal space. But they weren't leaving. They were changing their relationship with reality itself. "We make a decision that we have never made before," the Ancient One continued. "Instead of returning to our sleep, we will remain partially active. We will become guardians of consciousness in this galaxy, ensuring that thinking beings have the chance to grow and learn." Dr. Webb stared at his instruments in amazement. The energy readings were stabilizing at impossible levels. The Ancient Ones weren't disappearing. They were taking up residence in the spaces between dimensions, close enough to watch and protect, but far enough away to let younger species develop naturally. "What about the Zexkari?" Sarah asked, though the mental strain was becoming unbearable. The Ancient Ones turned their attention to the Crystal Aliens fleet. Instead of destroying them, they did something that had never been done before in cosmic history. They expanded the Zexkar's consciousness. War Master Zexthal suddenly found his mind open to perspectives he had never imagined. He could see his empire's actions from the viewpoint of their victims. He could feel the pain and loss that his conquests had caused across 100 worlds, but he could also see the potential for something different. The Ancient Ones showed him what the Zexkari could become if they chose growth over conquest, understanding over domination. "Choose," the Ancient Ones told both species. "You can continue your war, and we will allow it. Or you can choose to grow together, to learn from each other. We will not force you, but we will be watching." Sarah felt the quantum array connection finally break. She collapsed in the chair, her mind reeling from contact with cosmic intelligences. Elena and Webb rushed to help her, checking her vital signs and making sure she was still sane. "Is it over?" Elena asked. Sarah looked at the view screen, where the Ancient One's presence could still be felt as subtle distortions in space-time. The Zexkari fleet was motionless, their crews apparently struggling with their expanded consciousness. "No," Sarah said quietly. "It's just beginning." Over the following hours, representatives from both species met in the shadow of the Ancient One's presence. The Zexkari, their perspectives forever changed, began to understand what their empire had truly cost. Humans, still reeling from their brush with cosmic forces, had to learn how to forgive enemies who had sought their extinction. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, conflicts, moments when the fragile peace almost broke apart. But gradually, with the Ancient Ones watching from beyond normal space, the two species began to work together. Dr. Webb and his former enemies established the Galactic Consciousness Preservation Initiative, dedicated to protecting developing civilizations from the mistakes that had nearly destroyed both their species. Sarah Chun became the first human ambassador to the reformed Zexkari Collective, helping to build bridges between crystal and carbon-based life. The war was over, but not because one side had defeated the other. It ended because both sides had learned to see beyond their own limited perspectives and in the spaces between stars, the Ancient Ones watched and waited, no longer sleeping but not quite awake. They had found something they thought lost forever, a reason to hope that consciousness might be worth preserving after all. Humanity had not won through superior weapons or tactics. They had won by teaching cosmic gods about mercy. And in doing so, they had saved not just themselves, but the very concept of redemption itself. The universe was a little less empty now, and a little more hopeful.